Hello, everyone. Welcome to Start the Week with Spencer. This is our weekly webinar here at Domain International, where we take questions from parents around the world on different social media platforms. We've got YouTube and Instagram and Facebook. So wherever you are in the world, feel free to go ahead and type your questions into the comments box, and we will get to them in order. Today, I'm going to start with short topic, and then I'll open it up to questions. I wanted to talk about how do you begin the process of teaching math to a child with special needs, including a child who doesn't speak or has challenges with speaking. There is not a lot that's understood in the educational world about how to begin teaching math to a child with special needs. Many children, when they go to school, aren't taught math at all. It's kind of written off as a subject because it's just expected the child will fail, and that's a shame. And so I want to talk today about how do we go about what's the first step. Now, there are many steps in teaching a child math. We don't have the time today to get to all of them, but we can talk about the first step. And so the first thing that I'd like to say, and again, as people join, go ahead and start typing your questions in. I'd like to start by explaining the foundational math ability that basically all math understanding relies upon. And this is an innate human ability called innate number sense. Innate number sense is the ability to look at a small quantity and instantaneously recognize what it is. So for example, if I show this to you on my fingers, your brain instantly reads that as 4. Similar to if I showed you a word, you could read the word. When I show this to you, you instantaneously know that's 4. If I show this to you, you know that's 2. If I show this, it's 5. You don't have to count. And that's why it's called innate number sense. It's built into us as humans. It's our ability to sense quantities. The problem is many children who have had a brain injury, children with developmental delays, because of their neurological disorganization, do not have this ability. And so you show them this, and they may have no understanding of what that is, or maybe at best they can go 1, 2, 3, 4. They can count it, but counting is not the same as number sense. Why is number sense so important? Well, imagine for a second that you're trying to learn addition in first grade, and you're told that 1 + 1 = 2. Well, if you don't understand that this is 1 and this is 1, right? If you don't have the ability to look at that and understand what it is, how could you possibly understand that putting them together makes 2? Again, you don't even understand what 2 is, because if I show this to you, you have no sense of what that is. So innate number sense is the foundational math skill that you need to build all mathematical understanding on. If it's not there, then math becomes almost impossible to teach a child. Harvard did some really interesting education where they looked at 9th graders. So these are children who are 14, 15 years of age who failed consistently in math. And what they found is that these children, these were like the bottom performers in the classes of math, that almost all of them had weak number sense. If you showed them a small quantity, they had to count it. They couldn't look at this and know it's 4. And Harvard in that research demonstrated, if a child can't do this, how are we supposed to teach them multiplication? And so, yeah, that's the most important skill needed. So I'm going to just pull up a PowerPoint presentation and just explain over a couple minutes how you could begin the process of teaching a child this innate number sensibility. So give me a moment while I pull up my PowerPoint and we can look at it together. Again, for everyone who's joining late, we're talking about how to start teaching a child math who is a child with special needs. By the way, this is something that could also be done with neurotypical children as well. So here you can see on my screen a poker chip, and poker chips happen to be my favorite tool for teaching innate number sense. Why? Because they are uniform, right? You can get them all in the same color. They're easy for the child to manipulate and hold. So they're just really, really good for this purpose. So what we're going to do with these poker chips is we're going to teach quantities to the child, both in order and randomly. So basically, you'd sit down with a child at a tabletop or on the floor, and you'd say to your kid, "Hey, that's one." So you'd put down one in front of them and say, "That's one." And then you'd put down a second one and say, "That's two. Here's three. Look at four. That's five." Right? So you're showing your child a quantity between one and five, and you're just stating what the name is. So that's how you would present them in order. Now, presenting them in order has some use, right? It's good for a child to understand the order that numbers come in, but we don't recommend you always do it in order. Because as you can imagine, right, if we do it in order every time, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it gets a little boring for the child. They start to expect what's coming next. So the best thing to do is teach it in order one time a day, like I just showed you. One time a day, you go from 1 to 5 in order. But then 2 times a day, you're going to show them randomly to the child. So for example, you'd put down 3 and say 3. Then you might show 2 and say 2, 5, 4, 1. So we show them in random order 2 times a day because, first of all, it's more interesting for the child. And when it's more interesting, the child focuses more and their retention becomes better. And again, we don't want the child to know what's coming next. We want them to recognize these quantities as if they're an image, right? You want your child to look at that and instantaneously know 4. If we can develop this very simple ability from 1 to 5, now it's simple, but not necessarily easy for all children. When we teach this ability, then we can start to teach a child how to add, right? Because now they understand what it really means to be the quantity 4, right? So when you teach that child 2 plus 2 equals 4, they already know what 2 is. They already know what 4 is. So it becomes easy for them to start putting these facts together. So I would teach these poker chips one time in order, 2 times mixed for a week to a child. And that would be my first step in teaching a child math. Now, of course, as I said, there is a lot that we can say at Doman International about math education. You know, we give families years of math curriculum for teaching children at home. But this is where we start, because if a child can't do this, we could spend, and many schools do this, they'll spend years trying to teach a child 1 plus 1 equals 2 and scratch their heads. Why is the kid not getting it? It's because they don't have this foundational ability. Okay, so I wanted to show everyone what that first step of math looks like. All right, and now I am happy to open things up to questions. So whether you're joining me on Instagram, YouTube, or Facebook, go ahead and start typing your questions in. I always urge everyone, try to get your questions in early, because sometimes they all come in at the very end and I can't get to all of the questions before I have to sign off. A couple of quick announcements while I'm waiting for questions. So first of all, Doman International has a lot of upcoming trips where we're doing appointments with families of children with special needs. So our next trip is at our European Center in Italy, which that's going to be between October, I believe, 21st and October 31st. So if you happen to be a European family or a family in the Middle East who wants their child seen as soon as possible, we do still have one place available for our European appointments. In November, between November 9th and 16th, we're doing appointments in Bangalore and New Delhi, India. I believe we still have a few places available there. And in December, we are seeing families in California. So families on the West Coast of the United States will come and see us there. We are continuing to see families throughout the year at our center here in Philadelphia in the United States. This is our headquarters. And we also see families throughout the year in Moscow, Russia as well. If we look to 2025, and we will be announcing all of our 2025 dates pretty soon, I know that in February, we're going to be doing appointments in both Miami, Florida, and in Australia, Melbourne, Australia, and in New Zealand. So if you're in any of those locations, we will be coming there in February. And then in March, we will be doing appointments in Serbia and Croatia. I think I've gotten all of them listed. Hopefully I didn't forget any locations. All right. I will bring up Colleen Hudson now. Colleen is the director of our representatives at Doman International. Our representatives are the first people to speak to families as they inquire about Doman International's work. Colleen, thanks for being here.
Yeah, good morning.
Colleen, it's hard for me to keep all the dates for courses in mind. Do you mind just talking a bit about the Doman Method courses that are coming up and when they're starting?
Yes, absolutely. So we have, we just started a course in Spanish today, as well as a course in Russian. And for November, which these will be our last courses for 2024, we will have Serbian, Italian, and English, all beginning on November 4th. And the English course, we have both the online Doman Method course, the original, and then we also have Answering Autism. So that will also be happening concurrently.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Colleen. Okay, so let's see. I don't see any questions coming in yet. I got a question recently from a parent who they submitted the question online about when it's okay to teach children using cards as opposed to teaching them using screens. And they were specifically asking about, things like the Doman Method reading program. When is it okay to use cards? When is it okay to use screens? So, my general recommendation for all families is to start with cards for a few reasons. First of all, screens have become a major distraction for a lot of kids. When you pull, reading words, for example, up on an iPad screen, the child might associate iPad with a game that they play or with YouTube. And so the problem is you pull up teaching materials on it, and the child automatically is kind of thinking about these other things that they want to do. So very often, the great use of cards, similar to having books in your home, I think vast majority of parents read real books to their children, not ebooks, for example. The great thing about having cards is that children don't associate it with any distractions like they might with a screen. And so you're not essentially competing with the many things online that are trying to, distract kids. So cards are basically, with all children, the right way to begin. Now, sometimes with older children, once we've done, quite a extensive reading program with them and gotten them to begin to read books on their own, especially I'm talking about children who are maybe 5 years and up, we will sometimes, move toward using electronics, because at that point, the child is already autonomous in many ways. They can learn on their own. And they are innately interested in their reading program, their math program, their encyclopedic knowledge program. And so when we then pull up those same materials on a screen, they're already used to it. They like it. And so they're not distracted thinking about other things that could be done on a screen. The other issue with screens is, and this is still something which is very much being researched, but especially with young children, young children, their physiology is different from adults. They have thinner skulls, and their brains are far more absorbent not just in terms of information. I mean, we talk a lot here about how young children are able to take in information at an incredible rate, and that's true. But also, their brains are also able to absorb, for example, chemicals or heavy metals easier, right? This is why a young child who might have a lead exposure could have a much worse reaction than an adult. It's because their actual tissues absorb things easier. So the problem is if you give a child a screen, which may be like a 4G or 5G connected device, which is, emitting a certain amount of radiation and a lot of electromagnetic frequencies. Those frequencies are able to penetrate the thin skull and also the brain easier. And we still don't fully understand what those effects are if we're handing phones or tablets to very young children. We do know that if children are spending 2 or more hours a day, so these are children between birth and age 5, we know from research if they are spending 2 hours or more time a day on a screen, that it actually alters parts of their brain. Their gray and white matter is altered. And we don't know the full ramifications of it because unfortunately, we're in the midst of this, right? And there are a lot of young children now growing up on screens, but we do know that's unhealthy. And so I really recommend to parents of young children, it's best to avoid screen use as much as possible for as long as possible. And that's why when you're teaching a child how to read, how to do math, how to learn encyclopedic knowledge, best to start with cards rather than on a screen. All right. I'm going to pull Colleen back up. Hi, Colleen. Colleen, so I'm wondering, we talked a bit about math. What are the common questions you get from parents, specifically about the cognitive parts of our program? Anything in particular that stands out to you? I think you're muted, Colleen.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, I actually had a question the other day from a parent who wanted to know what, they said, oh, reading and math, that sounds like a great idea. I like that idea. But, is it really that necessary for their brain, for their neurological development? We're worried about the walking and all of that. So what is the cognitive program going to do as part of the bigger picture?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think when families come to Doman International, they're usually in one of two groups. The one group are parents who know their child needs that, right? These are children who might have been diagnosed as dyslexic or have learning problems. And those parents know, okay, my child is struggling and my kid needs help in the cognitive areas. And then there are parents who, it might be because the child is quite young, or because the child has other significant problems. Maybe the child doesn't walk yet, the child doesn't talk yet. And so it's, this idea of teaching reading to a child seems like almost like a distant dream, like, yeah, great, I'll do that one day when I get to that place. But what a lot of people don't realize is that the reading program itself, for example, can help speech development. It can help comprehension, which are two of the most common issues that children with special needs have. And the reason why it helps with, comprehension and speech is that because reading in and of itself is language, right? We've got, we are showing the child words and also reading them out loud. So we're saying, elephant and lion, right? And these things are growing the child's understanding because we're bringing more language into their environment. And then also it's very common for children's speech to start growing when we begin this program. One mom told me, and I'll never forget what she said. She said, the reading program gave my child his voice. She had a 4-year-old diagnosed with autism who was nonverbal when he started the program. And when he started to see these words, he started to repeat them. Then he started to use them in his daily language. And I think the reason why is many children with special needs are better visual learners than they are auditory learners. So it's easier if they're shown something, they can grasp it pretty quickly. But if you were just to explain it to them verbally, it might be hard for them to grasp. And so when we show things to them in a fast way, because we always show materials quickly, and in a repeated way, it makes it easier for them to learn it and retain it, and then to speak it. And so I'd say, probably more than 90% of the families that come to them come to us, comprehension and speech are really big concerns. And so for those families, it's very helpful. The other thing I'll say about our cognitive part of the program is that children tend to love it, and it becomes a reward for the other parts of the program. Because, for example, let's take a child who may be unable to move well, right? So we have to start certain Doman method programs with them to get them to crawl on their own, let's say. And so if they know that at the end of that crawling session, there's going to be something really fun and delightful for them to look at, right? So this is a motorcycle from a set of cards of different vehicles. If they know, okay, I'm going to expend some energy and move, but at the end of this, I'm going to get something in return, and best yet, it's something that's going to grow them cognitively, everyone wins, so it interestingly, the cognitive part of the program becomes a reward for the physical part.
That makes a lot of sense.
All right, let's see. All right, we're still waiting for questions to come in. So, Colleen, as we get close to the Doman method courses that are starting up and the Answering Autism course starting in November, what are some of the questions you're getting from parents now about those courses?
A lot of families ask how much time is going to be required of them to attend the course, because they know it's from home and they want to make sure they get the best result out of it, and really put their best into it. So they ask, how much time should I devote per day or per week? That's a big question.
And what are your thoughts on that, Colleen?
I tell them, if you budget about an hour a day, that's going to be more than enough time, honestly, because the lectures themselves are about 24, 25 hours altogether. And then we have our live Q&A sessions. Those are flexible because we schedule them at different times of day and throughout the weeks, because we have families from all over the world. So, of course, somebody in New Zealand is not going to be attending a Q&A at 2 in their morning, probably. But so we've made that really flexible. And then their staff coach, they have access to contact them whenever they like, and the staff get back to them quickly. But I think typically telling families, just mentally prepare yourself. About an hour a day would be great. But some families store it all up for the weekends, if they've got maybe childcare then, or they can kind of blitz on that. So it's a kind of cool that everybody can do what works for them, because that's definitely not always the case with online courses.
Yeah, because the Doman method course, for those everyone who's new to this info, it used to be a live course, right? So parents used to fly from around the world to Philadelphia, and you can imagine the costs that they would incur in that travel and the hotels and the food. It was very expensive for families. And so we put the Doman method course online to make it as accessible as possible. We actually brought in a camera crew, filmed a live course in process. So you're getting essentially the same experience as a parent sitting in the auditorium themselves, and at a greatly reduced cost. And so, yeah, what I tell parents a similar thing to you, Colleen. I say, listen, 7 or 8 hours of lectures come out a week. That's about 1 hour a day. Just make sure that when you begin the course that you've already accounted for that time in your schedule, and make sure it's kind of sacred time, because the course is really for your child. And when parents take the course, almost unanimously, they will tell us this was by far, the most productive and important course I've ever taken for my child, And they usually also, another common thing which is told to us at the end of the course is, I see my child in a different way. I now know what they're capable of. I know what their potential is. But it's really important to get everything you can out of the course to make sure that you're scheduling that time.
Yeah, so true.
All right. Thanks, Colleen.
Yeah, you bet.
All right. I'm looking to see if we have any questions that have come in. I see we have a bunch of people watching us on Instagram. Go ahead and start typing your questions in, and we'll take them in order. Now, for everyone who's joining late, I started off today by talking about the most important math skill that a child can have, which is called innate number sense. And I talked about how to use a simple object like poker chips to teach a child that innate ability. So if you're joining late, I do recommend you go back, later on and rewatch the first part of this webinar. I think you'll find it very helpful. All right, I have a comment here from Annabella who says, when I finished the courses, I thought, now I understand so many things that no one could explain to me, including the doctors. Thanks, Annabella. Yeah, I think that there are many things in the course. I was thinking recently about doing a webinar with parents where the sole topic of the webinar is for parents to join and ask me a question or ask some of our staff a question that no one has ever been able to answer for them. Because I think that for the vast majority of questions that remain in parents' minds, why is it my child always needs to hold a railing when they walk down the stairs? Why is it that my child, every time we go to a party, they shrink up and hide in the corner? All of these questions have an answer, right? Children are, even children with special needs, who might have very severe symptoms. They're all acting rationally, right? They're acting rationally, just experiencing the world in a different way. And so the thing is, if you see the world, literally see the world in a different way, if you hear it differently, if you feel it differently, it's going to greatly alter your behavior. And that's what's happening with these children. And so I think a lot of people look at the behaviors and the sensory issues and behaviors that children have, and they think it's all kind of irrational. And no, there's a reason why they're doing it. We just have to understand why they're doing it. And then once you understand why they're doing what they're doing, then you can begin to address it. But if you don't understand why they're doing it, then there's no way you're going to possibly give any kind of treatment which will help a child. And so that's why my grandfather, Glenn, focused so much on understanding child development. He created the developmental profile to see what is it like in the first 6 years of life for children to develop. How do kids develop? Because he innately understood he had to understand that first before recommending different treatments and therapies to kids. All right, we've got a comment here from Abby. I don't have questions today. I enjoy attending the live videos, and thank you for your extraordinary effort. Thank you. I really appreciate that, Abby. Abby, out of interest, where are you joining from? Like, where in the world? All right, I've got a question here from Sarah. Sarah says, I can't get my youngest child to pick which hand is his dominant writing hand. Trying lots of hemispheric dominance activities and hoping that helps. So, Sarah, it's a good question, and what I would usually begin with because I see many children and it's not really clear what their dominant hand is, I will usually begin with other activities and see what hand they tend to use, right? So activities like throwing a ball, what hand does he tend to use for throwing a ball? pulling open a heavy door. It has to be something that requires a bit of challenge, because we tend to use our dominant side for challenging things. Eating with a fork is another thing. So yeah, I would probably begin by looking at those activities first and see if he's leaning one way. Because sometimes you'll start to do those activities and say, oh, wow, 80% of the time he's using his right hand, he's probably right-sided. And that way you can start putting the pen or pencil into that hand. I think you make a very important point, because a lot of parents intuitively assume their child is going to be right-handed, and a lot of teachers do this as well. So they just put a pen into the child's right hand. Now, listen, the majority of the time they're going to be right. 85% of people are right-handed. But the problem is, for the 15% of children who are meant to be left-handed, that can create havoc, right? To say, no, you're going to use your subdominant and not your dominant hand. So you could do that. Another thing you can do, Sarah, besides just evaluating what hand he uses, is looking at, what eye he uses and what foot he uses. So, for example, foot, you could have him kick a ball. You could, have him put his 2 feet together and tell him to take a big step forward and see what foot goes out in front, right? Try to have him hop on one foot, see what foot he leans toward. Because again, most of the time, if a child is right foot dominant, they're probably going to be right-handed. Not always, but the vast majority of the times. And so sometimes when you put all that collective information together, you can figure it out. I also recommend, especially when a child is young, I recommend putting a pen in front of them on the table and just seeing what hand they go to pick it up with. And listen, if your son seems to alternate hands constantly, you might have to start guiding him to use his dominant side. But if you consistently kind of put it in the middle and allow him to pick it up with the hand he wants, you might start to see, okay, no, he's really favoring this specific side, and we can go with that and have him use that for writing. Hope that helps. Feel free to send me, to post any follow-up questions, Sarah, if you have them. Oh, Abby's joining us from Yemen. Oh, thank you for joining us, Abby. Wow, it's really great that we have people joining from everywhere in the world. All right. Who else has a question? I'll give everyone a minute or so. Colleen, I'll bring you back in if that's okay. So I was wondering, Colleen, from any other common questions that you get from parents when they're just considering our program?
Yes. A big one is when parents say, I've read that nutrition is important to the Doman method, or I read about your nutrition program, even into the specifics, but my kid literally eats 3 things, and it was a struggle to get them to eat those 3 things. So if none of those 3 things are on the nutrition program, does that mean the Doman method is not going to be effective for us? Or are you going to try and force our kid to eat foods that they really won't accept right now? Parents get very anxious on that score.
Well, I would say my first answer, which isn't even specifically about nutrition, but it's almost a general rule. I would say that when families join our program, there's always one part of our program which is going to be more challenging for them than the others. And for each family, it's different. For some families where maybe they have to do a mobility program with the child, for sometimes those children need a lot of motivation to do physical activities. And for other children, it might be, with our cognitive program, like they really want sessions super short, or they only like specific subjects, So almost every child has their innate interests and things that they love and enjoy, and then they're going to be a little more rigid or stubborn about certain things. And listen, that's not even about them having a special need necessarily. It's because they're kids, and that's the way kids are. And so I would really recommend to a family, don't get intimidated by the entire program because one thing there looks a little scary to you. And there's a few reasons for it. First of all, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? If 90% of the other programs could help your child, you don't want to throw that out just because this 10% over here is going to be tougher. But the other thing is that we really try to, with families, and we've learned this over time, with those families who have children who are incredibly picky eaters, we will try to give them, one thing to change perhaps in 2 months, and say, okay, we're going to make this one tiny change and let's just focus on this, rather than saying, okay, because as you said, if a child only eats 3 foods, and we're going to come in and say, you have to eliminate this, this, and this, and the child won't eat it all, that's obviously a problem. Like, we're not going to do that. And our nutritionists, in the end, even though they know what foods might be best for a child, what foods might be worst, they are nutritionists. They care about a child's health. They're not going to recommend something which is going to be detrimental for the child's health. And so usually we have to, with those families, take things at a very kind of gradual step-by-step basis. Keep in mind, we've worked with tens of thousands of children over the last 70 years. We've seen a lot of picky eaters. I mean, it's a weekly part of our work. A family comes for the first time and this child only eats chicken nuggets and pizza. That's it's a commonplace thing which is discussed amongst our staff. And so over time, we've created ways to coach parents on how do you gradually get your child to try new foods? How do you address some of the underlying sensory problems that a child has? You see, one of the reasons why a lot of kids are picky is because they're overly sensitive, for example, to smell and taste. And so when we start to address those issues, their palate opens up and they're willing to try other things. So sure, there are certain kind of behavioral things we have to approach. There's certain sensory things we have to approach. And then the child over time becomes more and more open. And then when we can really start to make those drastic changes, add variety, usually, Colleen, because I know a lot of parents are worried about removing food, very often we focus first on adding variety, and then we'll start eliminating if a child is truly limited in what they can eat.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. That's a good one. All right. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions. So listen, I'll give everyone one more minute. So if you've got another question, go ahead and send it in. And if we don't have any more, I guess we'll sign off and call it a day. Oh, Annabella is saying here, and many times we spent years in feeding therapy without results. Yeah. Out of interest, Annabella, now with, how are you finding feeding with your daughter now? Are you finding that she's open to a lot of things, or is her diet still very limited? All right, I'll give everyone maybe another 30 seconds or so to send in questions. If we don't have any more, I guess we'll be done for the day. Colleen, I'm just going to add you one last time. Can you just tell people how to get in touch with you if they want to learn more about our program?
Yes, very good. So my email address is info, I-N-F-O, @domaninternational.org. My phone number is 814-232-8668. That's WhatsApp as well as regular phone, text, whatever. And I'm, my whole job is answering questions about the Doman Method course, what it covers, how we help families. I have personal experience, and of course, we do have 70 years now of experience working with families. So if you or if anybody you know might benefit from our information, our course, just reach right out.
Great. Thanks so much, Colleen. And
Yeah.
I've shared everyone the email address on the screen so you can take it down if you need to. Yeah, Annabelle is saying no. She's tolerating more kind of food and with less anxiety. Great. Wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah, and what I'll start to do, sometimes as children get older and they become more open to trying things, I'll I'll start to give them like a 100 food in 100 days challenge. And again, if for everyone who's joining who has, kids who are incredibly limited in diet, this is something maybe for the future. Once we're able to address these underlying issues, this might be something that we do. But yeah, as children's palates start to open up and they become more willing to try things, I'll do 100 foods in 100 days. And what we'll do with the child is mom will, on a calendar each day, write down a new food that the child's going to try, and I don't even mean eat a lot of something. I just mean try it. So it's like, all right, today we're going to try, chicken. And then the next day it's like, all right, today we're going to try cilantro. And, the third day, okay, now today we're going to try Brussels sprouts, and a lot of children like it because, first of all, it gives variety in their life. It gives them a bit of excitement, like, wait, what is this thing we're going to try today, right? Because you can build it up and say, today we're going to try this, and they're like, oh, what's that? Okay, I'm going to try something new. A lot of people like newness in their life. And so it brings a little bit of excitement. And then also the child starts to accumulate this sense of they're working towards something, because it's like, look, in 100 days, we're going to do 100 foods. They feel like they're really achieving something. And maybe you get to day 64 and they're not sure if they want to try this food, but hey, I've done 63 days. I might as well try something new today. And so, the only thing is, okay, take a taste each day of something new. I'll end off on one last note, and then I'll call it a day. I saw an interesting report on comparing children in France to the United States, and how children in France tend to be much more open-minded about trying foods than American children are. It's typical for French children to be eating, foods like, escargot, which are snails, which, American kids would never even think about trying. And so the report was really asking a simple question: why are French children open to trying new foods so much more so than American children? And what it found was that French parents talk about food a lot more to their children than American parents do. So French parents, when they're often eating with their children, they are describing the foods that they're eating to the kids. They're saying, "Oh, do you taste that? That's a little bitter," or, "Oh, do you taste the sweetness of this?" Or let's smell the food. Like, do you smell the aroma? And essentially, they're speaking about food at an intellectual level to the children. And that creates a much deeper respect in the children for the foods. And also, I think that, especially as a child is trying a new food, and we there are many foods we like as adults, but we can probably think back, to the first time we tried kale or something like that, and it's like, whoa, what is that taste? But when you have someone guiding you through the process and telling you, oh, it's going to taste a little bit bitter, but can you taste it? Can you taste the salt on it, or whatever the person is describing for you? It orients you, and that helps ease you into the process. So I would really recommend to parents, start talking about food to kids. I think a lot of the time we just think stick food on a plate, hand it to the child, and that's it. But even just describing to the child what's on the plate and what it is they're tasting can really help the child connect to their food on a different level, and start to open the child's mind up to different possibilities. All right, everyone. I see one last question here from Abby. Is it normal that after the first year, a child refuses to eat as before? My daughter wants milk and refuses to eat. Okay, Abby. Well, would I say that's normal? No, I wouldn't say that's normal. Children at around 1 to 2 years of age, they do tend to become more manipulative. They tend to start to realize their likes and dislikes, and they tend to, become stronger in temperament, and they start to show parents what they don't want. But I think what I don't understand from your question, Abby, is she refusing to eat certain foods, or is she kind of fully refusing to eat? Because you say she wants milk but is refusing to eat. If a child is really not eating and not getting the necessary amount of food to gain weight, that obviously would be a concern. I would recommend, especially for a child who isn't eating a lot around meals, trying to focus on giving water rather than milks or juices, because often they will kind of fill up on those things, and then when it comes time for a meal, they're not ready to eat. But again, I'm just saying this, Abby, kind of from general standpoint. I don't know all the specific situation about your child. Of course, Abby, if you wanted to, send us a message on Instagram, and we could set up some kind of appointment for you with one of our nutritionists. If you wanted guidance on feeding your child at that age, we could set up some kind of consultation with the nutritionist. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. If you have any further questions, if you'd like to set up a call with Colleen, feel free to send an email to info@domaninternational.org or send us a direct message on social media. All right. Have a great rest of your week, everyone. See you next week. Bye-bye.